Welcome to Walden, also known as Life in the Woods. Let's get this started with. Today we're going to go ahead and talk about the whole full book summary. And with that, without further ado, let's start off. Our author here, Henry David Thoreau, is also the main character, Henry David Thoreau. This is not exactly a journal. While Henry David Thoreau was living near Walden Pond, he didn't really keep up a diary as much as well do. Well, he did start the manuscript of Walden. Afterwards, it took a few more years to actually finish the book, but then afterwards, he went ahead, and this is the only novel that Henry David Thoreau has ever written. So Disobedience doesn't count, because it's an essay. It's considered an essay. Speaking of which, Walden itself is the practical novel on giving us the most modern advice, how to live your life. It's the best advice. Also, it's kind of ironic because Henry David Thoreau refused to pay his taxes and lived alone in the woods at the time as he wrote this. And so, you might not think that kind of person will be the greatest at giving you the best advice in living modern life. Regardless, there's so much you can actually go ahead and say here too. Like, all the things, all of this is condensed into one calendar year, 365 days. Maybe it's actually technically just a little bit over a year. Like, springs, it starts with springs and then goes on with summer, autumn, winter, and then ends with spring again. Afterwards, there's so much more to really be talking about, but we don't really have the time to go ahead. It starts off in spring when Henry David Thoreau goes ahead and starts making his cabin. He has to go ahead and create it really quickly. He also keeps careful track of his expenses so that he can prove that he can still work for only 1 day a week and rest for 6 days and still make a profit. And he barely does make a profit too. About $8 if I did the math correctly myself too. In 1 day's work he got $28. Not bad for a day's work. And then later, for the rest of the 6 weeks, he went ahead and on the cabin only, he spent $36 building it too. The wood he got from the surroundings because the surroundings was owned by his friend Ralph Waldo Emerson. And Ralph Waldo Emerson permitted Henry David Thoreau to go ahead and build the cabin over there right there too. And so with that, there's so much more that we can do and talk about. Speaking of which, next up we have this. He went ahead and started building the cabin, and then he just got the necessities, the seeds, just basically the seeds, and then the fire and the things, and all that just costed a total of $36. The windows, of course, costed a bit, but then again, he doesn't know how to make his own, and he doesn't have the materials to make his own too. Afterwards, he goes ahead, spring is just going ahead, looking outside, and figuring out what life is like too. And however, he goes ahead and discuss with himself. He's a little bit disgusted with himself because he likes eating, and eating is untranscendentalist. Eating should only be when it's necessary, not because you want to. You shouldn't eat potato chips, and you shouldn't even be eating potato chips according to transcendentalism. You shouldn't be eating a fish because you like eating fish. You shouldn't be catching fish because you like eating fish. You should go ahead and eat whatever you can because you can, and only when you need to. If it gets rotten, well, too bad. It's food anyway. It's not like you can live without it. Actually, you can't live without it. Next up, summer happens. During the summer, Henry David Thoreau goes ahead and starts planting seeds. He doesn't indulge in the homeless artistry as much as he wants to. Unfortunately, manual labor keeps getting in the way, and so he just proceeds to not doing it and not reading it as much as he wants to. But what he ends up with is an interesting dilemma of he himself going ahead and plowing the seeds, doing manual labor, and other things as well too. Speaking of which, he goes ahead, when he does have time to go ahead and learn, he doesn't read the book, he goes ahead and during manual labor also learns the things in manual labor as well too. Like, he basically learns his lessons from the beans, and when he learns the lessons from the beans, he goes ahead and learns quite a bit more than I actually thought he would. He also puts in allegories up to now from sources ranging from Greek mythology all the way to 18th century novels. Technically 19th century novels. But then again, you can't have 20th century or 21st century novels there because, well, when the book was first published, that didn't exist yet. Speaking of which, next up, there's actually so much more that you can go ahead and say here too. You can get ready in doing things, and he went ahead and started getting ready for the winter too. During autumn, he just went ahead and had a race for winter, and during the winter, he could just go ahead and stockpile food. He did stockpile enough, but he criticizes himself for stockpiling a little bit too much. Although normal people would usually stockpile more than what Henry David Thoreau did. Henry David Thoreau did that. And potato peelings, basically potato chips, he went ahead and gave it to the rabbit. He basically liked company, and the company he has in the nature is the animals, whether it's the brown hare or the wild cat, and sometimes even the domestic cat going into the woods and feeling more at home than the wild cat. And so much more here too. Squirrels, when the other animals are actually having a hard time finding food too, he also leaves them food outside so that he gets some forced companionship. The squirrels and the ants go ahead, go near his place, and went ahead and fed them a little bit and watches them eating this thing too. When three ant species, or was it two? Three ant species went ahead and had a little war against each other. Yes, ants are always at war with each other. Went ahead and brought one of each of the three ant species into his house and watched the battle more closely. It's like a little World War II, but ants. World War Ant, shall we call it. And it doesn't really feel that lonely too. Just because he's living alone in the woods doesn't mean that he doesn't like visitors. He actually acted like visitors a lot, and he goes and has a lot of them eventually too. Three most notable ones, because they appear several times in the book, and they're the only ones who are worth mentioning, who goes ahead and calls them the woodchopper, the philosopher, and the poet. Now the woodchopper, who basically just goes ahead, he likes a lot too, he thinks he's smart, but he thinks he's also kind of narrow-minded, so he goes ahead and just asks them questions just to see how he will respond to them too. And the poet is just one of his friends, and they talk a lot too, they meet together and do things, while the philosopher is like a hobo, but he calls them wise, going from the other people and from the things that we want. It goes ahead away from the people away from the things that we want to, and then, well, just lives like him, but a bit worse as well too. But he calls him the wisest person he's ever met in his life, minus Ralph Waldo Emerson, of course. I'm assuming. Now, speaking of Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau doesn't mention this, but he lived with Ralph Waldo Emerson for 2 years. He did the housework chores, and he also tutored his kids. But Ralph Waldo Emerson and his wife went ahead and told Henry David Thoreau that maybe he has been house gets a little too low. So that's why Ralph Waldo Emerson permitted Henry David Thoreau to build his cabin near Walden Pond. Afterwards, of course, there's so much more that we can still talk about. Next up, we also have a bunch of other weird things to talk about, such as nature learning too. Eventually during winter, Henry David Thoreau goes ahead and uses all of his preparations, and loses all those preparations, although it is meager compared to what the normal person would normally have in their stockpiles during winter. And he went ahead and just used all that supplies up too. He also looks and studies Walden Pond itself too, because Walden Pond is now frozen, and since it's frozen, it's still sort of clear ice as well too. He also has to technically break the ice with an axe just so he can get his first drink. Afterwards, he goes ahead and looks from the distance, tens of people going ahead to the Walden Pond and harvesting the ice. He describes ice harvesting like this. It's like, as in like, it's so simple and so well known how you harvest ice, that I don't need to explain at all. But today, we actually forgot how to actually go ahead and harvest ice. It's a lost art now, because we never actually needed to do it now. Speaking of which, so much more has happened inside Walden Pond as well too. He himself breaks a chunk of the ice out, and he realizes that the bubble that was at the bottom of the ice has soon, some more ice has grown above it, technically below it, so that the bubble is now in the middle. He goes ahead and studies it and gets a few lessons from it. You've got to read the book for yourself to find out. This is not a place where you can watch this video and then fake you read Walden. No. Afterwards, there's so much more you can talk about here too. Ice, he studies the ice, and then he goes ahead and watches the people too. He even describes that the water from Walden Pond, the ice of Walden Pond, is mixed with water of the Ganges. Do you know why he said this? Well, it's because he basically said ice from Walden Pond, technically all of America, went ahead and was shipped all over the world. Also, 75% of it was lost to melting. And it was because of this that one of the economies of the United States of America actually kind of grew too nowadays. We have refrigerators and ice makers, and they're pretty cheap to make yourself too. It's also really easy to make your own homemade one. Just make sure you buy some ice first, and then you put it into a can, and then put it on the ground so it doesn't melt as easily, and put the stuff inside too. It'll cool really quickly. And during the winter, of course, ice will be made. Yay, we store it during winter and go ahead and ship it to the rest of the world, such as India and Australia, which doesn't have winter during American summer. American winter. Afterwards, he goes ahead and reflects on all this and his experience as well too. Then he says that the second Nero, basically went ahead and lived the same way, and as the first year, as he described in Walden, then he ends chapter 17 with these lines. And I quote here, I finally left Walden Pond September 6th of 1847. I finally left Walden September 6, 1847. Afterwards, he went ahead and explained why he left Walden Pond himself too. He basically said something like this. This is just one of his lives. He basically described it like this, like, he already lived this life, and there are so many other lives that he should live too, to go ahead and show other people that there are other options than the common one too. And he just wants to go ahead and prove it to them too, and he cannot spare more time on this one life too. I wish he lived though. Then we would have had like a survival mode person for the rest of his life, but also probably having healthier for him too. And that's it. That's Walden, also known as Life in the Woods. I hope to see you guys soon, and so until next time, ciao please. Bye bye. Da 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 da.